Hello everyone, welcome to a new lecture and seminar lecture. Today we have a very special presentation. The speaker today is Professor Jasiuk. She is a professor in UIUC Department of Mechanical Sciences and Engineering. She received her doctoral degree from Northwestern, and she did it in theoretical and biomechanics. Before joining UIUC, she was also a faculty in Michigan State University. It's a long list: Georgia Institute of Technology and also Concordia University in Canada. Her focus is mechanics of materials, especially on nanocomposite materials, cellular material, and biological material. Today she will be giving a presentation about bones and bone-inspired materials. Please, let's give a warm round of applause.
Thank you so much. I think that this is not working. Just to let you know, I'm switching it. It's sorry, I didn't notice that.
What is it? What is still working?
It is still working, even though it's a red light.
Yes.
Red light means it's working fine. All right. Well,
Actually, you're right. It is not working.
so good afternoon. Great to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation to do this seminar. So, and thank you for the introduction. So today I would like to tell you about one aspect of my research, which is on bone and bone-inspired materials. So my interests are in mechanics of, and my research focuses on mechanics of materials. So I am, the questions in my research are why materials behave the way they do. I am working on a number of other materials, but bone has been a material that I'm quite passionate about, and I hope I will share with you some of this excitement. So, as contents of this and please feel free to interrupt me if you have questions. So the contents of my presentation are that I will speak first about bone and then about bone, a little bit about bone-inspired materials. And I want to show you that bone is actually an excellent structural material. So I am not suggesting to make buildings out of bones, but many aspects of it can be used to give ideas for designs, and we can learn from bone and nature. And also that it's a biological material, so it has additional characteristics which traditional engineering materials don't have, but would be nice if they had. What is bone? So bone is really ideal material for its function, and it has many functions. So structural function is part of it, so it provides support for soft tissues. So I'm standing right on skeleton, supports all the soft tissues, contributes to movement, protects organs like skull, rib cage, pelvic bones, but also has other functions which are not so crucial, yeah, there are other functions. So something to keep in mind when one later thinks about bioinspiration is that biological materials are often multifunctional, so they are optimized not only for one purpose, like in this case structural, but also other functions. So bone is a great structural material. It's stiff, strong, tough, and lightweight. Does it sound good? Right? And then, well, why does it have such good properties? So it is actually a composite material which consists of a polymer and ceramic. So polymers, mainly collagen and other proteins and organics, and minerals, which by weight, the percentages are given here. By weight, they are given here, but volume fraction-wise, about 50-50, 50 protein, 50 ceramic. And then fluids, so there is some porosity, more or less, and that's filled with fluids. And all of it is combined in a hierarchical way to form whole bones. Why is it in hierarchical way? Well, biological materials start from a cell, right? Or like from atoms, and cells from atoms make proteins and so on. So nature assembles materials from very small, like, pieces. So it's different than taking a bucket and putting a few materials there, mixing. Right? So nature creates materials which leads to hierarchical structures, and these structures contribute to the great properties. To make things even more interesting, and that's obviously, bone is a biological material. It's a living tissue, and it evolves due to mechanical loads and other factors. So having good diet, exercising a lot, and so on, makes bone healthy. Other factors may contribute to its not so good, and to declining those properties. So let's look at hierarchical structure. One thing to keep in mind that here I mentioned several scales, but one can take fewer scales or more scales. They are really continuous, so a choice here is not unique. And I'll explain in more detail what these different scales are. But basically, bone starts from atomic level up to forms from atomic level to whole bone level. So now the question is, a couple of questions: why to study bones? Why do I want to study bone? And also, why would I worry about its hierarchical structure? So there are a number of motivations for studying bone, but one of them can be, well, can we predict fracture? Or can we say if bone is healthy or not? So we know that bone fractures, so it has it has such excellent properties, but it still breaks, right? It breaks usually when bone is healthy. It breaks because something really bad was done to it, right? So usually it doesn't break for under just regular activities. But if something really bad happens, then something really, some high impact, car crash or ski accident, that will break. So the fracture may be caused by trauma, but also can be caused by disease. And there are a number of diseases that can make bone weaker. The most well-known is osteoporosis. And I'll comment more about that. So, fracture. Well, if we look at hierarchical structure of bone, actually fracture in any material starts at atomic level, right? The atoms start breaking and the material breaks. So if one looks at different structural scales in this complex hierarchical structure, there are different phenomena taking place when damage and fractures take place, sliding, microcracking, bridging, and so on. And bone has excellent toughness characteristics. So these factors contribute at different scales to that great toughness. So what I research objectives. So I would like to determine structure-property relations. I could say also composition, but that's part of implied in structure, and create predictive tools to given the information about bone, can we predict whether it's healthy or osteoporotic, and design new bones by materials. Here are a few images illustrating osteoporosis. So that's the bone disease that is characterized by bone fragility, and that usually happens at older age, after menopause, maybe in women, and also could happen any age if a person is not exercising enough, so people on bed rest, and there are astronauts going into space and so on when there's no gravity. So this may be an issue for young people also. So the idea is that bone becomes more porous and more prone to fracture. So now it's a little bit more detail about this hierarchical structure to give you an idea what one needs to study. So let's take first bone. You are quite familiar with bone at macro scale, I assume. But if you look at it more from through eyes of an engineer, you will see that it's a hollow tube. So why is it hollow? Does it help that it's hollow? Why not fill it in? Well, I guess it's a seminar. I should not be asking you questions, but. Well, hollow means that it will be better in bending, better in torsion, and lighter, right? So you could have a solid round. So cross-sectional area would be the same if you make it hollow or solid, but bending and torsion characteristics would be lower, right? And then there are ends here which are spongy, and these bone ends connect to other bones. So that's where the connections are, that's where the impacts are. So impact, right, so foams are better for impact absorption. And also it allows to redistribute load more. The outer portion is called cortical bone. So that's this dense, more stiff part of bone. And it has low porosity, 2% to 30. And the trabecular bone is this porous bone at ends, which can reach porosities up to 90. So if we look at these two bones now at mesoscale, cortical bone consists of concentric hollow cylinders. So, why hollow? Well, bone is a living tissue, so that's actually where blood vessels go. Okay? And nutrients come and waste is removed. And then, so these are these concentric cylinders. I'll show you more next slide. So imagine now a crack wants to go through it. Well, it has many layers to overcome, interfaces, these cavities, and so on. Quite complex bed. And then trabecular bone is a porous network, but with smooth surfaces. So going down the scale, if one looks at trabecular bone or this osteon, which is a concentric cylinder, you see that there are lamella. These are lamellar structures, and these lamella can have different orientations. So it's sort of like a laminated composite, right? Why engineers use laminated composite? Well, because in one direction it has best properties, but if we orient it in different directions, hopefully we improve properties in all directions, right? So same concept. And these lamellae can be arranged in rotated, twisted, or 90 degrees to each other, depending on location. And if we look at a single lamella, they are made of these fibrils, which are preferentially aligned, and there are some cavities, very small cavities, few microns, say a few microns by say 20 microns, and that's where bone cells reside. So they sense loads. If someone is exercising, they will create more bone and so on. They will give information to bone to create more bone. And these lamella are very thin, few microns. And finally, we go to the nanoscale or nanostructure level, and that's where you can see that bone is a nanocomposite material. So it's a combination of collagen fibrils, which are very, very small in diameter, less than a micron, around 100 nanometers. And then these apatite crystals, which again are nano-sized, and plus some nanocollagenous organics and fluids, which fill the bones. And so a triple helix, so that's a triple collagen molecule. They align in this special way to form collagen fibrils, and then mineralization takes place, fills in the voids, fills space outside, and creates a nanocomposite. If you try to make a nanocomposite with 50% of nanofillers, that's a really hard thing. They would just not want to mix it. But here, right, because it's self-biomineralization, the minerals bone biomineralizes up to 50%. So my quest now is to learn as much as I can about bone. And when I started working on this bone, and it was about 10 years ago, I thought, well, first year I'll work on bone, next year I'll work on cartilage, next year I'll work on something else. Here I am still working on bone, because there are so many interesting things there. So I want to understand how bone structure contributes to properties. Of course, the most interesting thing would be to study human bone, normal osteoporotic, see what are the differences. A lot of work has been done, but it's much harder to conduct such research because of possible disease transmission and so on. So safety is important. So I would not be able to do a number of tests that I would like to do. For example, mechanical tests. I would not want to fix bone. I would like to have it fresh or frozen and then thawed, and that would be hard to do on the university equipment. So I used animal bone, porcine, just because they were readily available here in Illinois. And but the problem was that animals don't get osteoporosis. They die before they get it. So, so I thought, let's study age effect, right? Very young, they're older, so are there differences? So the idea here was to develop techniques, to develop models, and then they can be extended to other bone types, right? Bone situations. So, and actually this is an important problem. There is not much study done on children bones. So, because there is not much such bone, such bone is not readily available. Another challenge in studying human bone, that there is so much variety. Genetics, diet, just many factors. So if I take one normal bone and one osteoporotic bone, how general it is when one looks at whole population. So if one takes an animal and uses the same that use the same diet and same species and just take it few months later, that's much more repeatable than dealing with human population. Right? So that was the motivation for that study. And yeah, so the idea is that, and here in engineering, one usually decides what one wants to mix, right? So one really knows composition. Like maybe for us it is not known, but one knows how much reinforcement one puts in something. Here in bone, well, we don't really know if young bone has more mineral than old bone and so on. So we needed to study composition. We wanted to see what are the changes in the structure and then what are resulting properties. And just a comment that that pig bone may be quite like human bone, but actually it's not a bad model. And many researchers study mice bones or rat bones, so pig bone is closer to human bone than rats. So here is a picture of bone. I imagine you've seen it before, but the idea is, okay, so here is our porcine bone. These little distances are centimeters, but of course, depending on age, bone will change in size from like very small, very young animal, maybe 10 centimeters, and bigger, like 6 months to 2 years, maybe a few times longer. So this picture, but then, okay, we have bone. Can we just take any piece of it and study? So we just cut it across and took a slice from the middle part, and then still looked right in 360 degrees. So basically looked at 4 quadrants to see if it matters where we look, and actually it does. So maybe a better picture here. So here are these 4 quadrants, and you can see that, here are the osteons, but really this part is not quite looking like osteons, and that's characteristic of large mammals. So it's good to know where one wants to look and what may be differences due to structural factors. And actually bone is not straight, it has a little bit of a curve, so that structure, difference in structure is related to that fact. So I'll go more quickly through the various methods, but the idea is that, collagen forms first, so these fibers form first, and then minerals go on top of it. So really seeing for understanding how these collagen fibers are aligned, it's quite useful. And one can do it with scanning electron microscopy and see a little bit, but this technique, second harmonic generation, allowed us to see collagen directions much more clearly. And the beauty here was that we didn't have to dry it, we didn't have to really prepare it much except for polishing to get nicer images. And then so here are some examples of how collagen fibrils change orientation as a function of position. Microcomputed tomography, which several of such machines are available at Beckman, can provide useful information. This is looking at quite crude resolution, so not too revealing, but interesting to notice that younger bone has smaller diameter but a larger thickness. And then as bone grows, it has larger diameter but thickness decreases. And here's the comparison. What was much more revealing for us using microcomputed tomography was to look at bone porosity. So actually these images are inverse images, because if bone has quite low porosity, solid, it's not so interesting. But if you show porosity, then one can see these interesting structures here, which are these canals. So yeah, there are different scales and so on. And this is a higher magnification, and you can see these little ellipsoids. And actually, these little ellipsoids are those holes, those voids in a single lamella where bone cells reside. So that was structure. Now moving on to chemical composition, we can use spectroscopy, FTIR, and that can tell us about mineral and organic phase, about the ratio of mineral to organic, and other factors. So you can see here, for example, at the red, so there are numbers associated with colors, but for simplicity, I removed them. So you can see that red means higher number. So you can see that older, young and more mature bone will have higher mineral content. Then, continuing on chemical composition, one technique that is used in clinical setting is so-called dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, and for short DEXA. So that's how bone is diagnosed in clinical setting. And DEXA is a number, scalar number, according to which doctor can say if person is has osteoporosis or not. And that's related to bone mineral density, which is related to proportional to mineral amount of mineral. So you can see that as age increases, amount of mineral increases. This is a very simple test, ash and water content test. So one takes a piece of bone, wet bone, and weighs it. And then dries that bone and weighs it again. So the removed water is assumed to be the porosity, right? And then one raises temperature much more to about 600 degrees. All the organic phase is burnt, minerals are left, and and one can get measurement of mineral content. So you can see here that mineral content increases and water content decreases with age. So bone becomes less porous and contains more mineral when body matures. So now we can look at properties. So nanoindentation is one of such techniques, and it allows one to probe bone at a single lamella level, look at these different lamella, different regions in bone. And so depending on the location, there will be different values, but overall with age, there is increase in elastic modulus and hardness of bone. And one can, of course, get viscoelastic properties of bone using dynamic indentation, nanoindentation. The other technique that I really piqued my interest, and I was very, very glad to find out about, is microindentation, or what it's actually called reference point indentation. And that was invented not long ago, about 10 years ago now. And the idea is that one can actually indent a bone. You will see in as we go to higher scales, we put little pieces of bone on the testing machine. That's not too practical to do on patient's bone, right? So, but here this indentation, microindentation, is not too bad. So basically, it's usually a tibia, and a small probe indents bone, very little, like 250 microns. So if you bump into a table, you probably get bigger bruise or if you get a flu shot, you get much deeper than that, right? and it sees how bone responds. And the idea is that you can so here stiffness increases with age, and indentation distance decreases. So the idea is that as you indent on bone, if this probe goes deeper into bone, means that bone is more soft or more prone to fracture, right? And so on. And then one can do tensile testing. So of course one can take a whole bone, but if we want to study, say, anisotropy, orientations, and so on, then one needs to do small samples, like a millimeter in thickness, maybe up to at most two centimeters in length. But really, bone is small, it has curvature, it has small thickness, so not much to work with. Sometimes I wish I worked on elephant bone or some really big animal bone, that I could have lots of material to work on. But we can still manage with this size and create little samples and do the testing. And again, modulus increases and strength increases with age. So now I mentioned that these samples are quite thin, just because the wall is quite thin, a couple of millimeters curvature, so thickness is about 1 or 2 millimeters. And one thing that we noticed that with bone, that sometimes we were getting brittle response, sometimes ductile, we were wondering what's happening. But then we looked at the cross sections and actually at different orientations, because we also studied orientations. And we noticed that we have quite large voids, and these voids, which are present in bone, are of comparable size to the sample size. So if a sample has a big void, it will break more quickly than the one that has less voids, right? So that affects properties. So that opens, this is a busy slide, but this is a topic that really fascinated me for a while and still does. And the idea is you have a material, can be concrete, can be whatever you think about. And the question is, how big of a region or how big of a sample to choose to study its properties, and whether it's experiments or whether it's computations, right? How big of a sample to take? And the idea is as follows, that we are after effective properties. But if we have two smaller size than so-called representative volume element, then we will have effective boundary conditions, and we will find so-called apparent properties. So whether we do experiments or we do computations, if we apply here traction boundary conditions, we'll be coming to effective property from below. If we apply displacement boundary conditions, we'll be coming from above. And if we reach representative volume element, we'll have the effective property. Right? So something to keep in mind, especially for materials like bone. Same with trabecular bone. It has these pores, and the material property porosity changes. So your samples are small, right? How representative are they? These are apparent properties. All right, time is going quickly. So just another sort of twist on this research, I gave a similar seminar a while back, and Professor Iwona Jasiuk from University of California in San Diego was studying bone by demineralizing it and deproteinizing it. So she was using chemicals to remove one phase. And I thought, this is beautiful. I have my models that have both phases. I can remove one, make one phase 0, and let's see what will happen. And that really led to quite nice adjustments to my models and comparison with experiments and so on. It really was a really long and productive collaboration. And yeah, one can use again micro-CT, look at untreated bone, demineralized, deproteinated, again its porosity. You see that these are self-standing structures. So that was another big discovery, that most models, researchers assume that bone has a matrix, polymer matrix with inclusions, ceramic inclusions. But if we have self-standing structures, whether we remove one face or the other, that means that actually the faces are interpenetrating. So, quickly about modeling. So we have these different scales, one can, I'll talk about them. And basically we want to look at strength, we want to look at strength and stiffness, but of course one can look at other things, and the main goal is to study fracture and strength. These numbers are not important, but the bottom line, but of course in models we need to enter properties of constituents. If you look at literature, they vary quite a bit. And on top of it, they are, so one doesn't, so it's not, they vary spatially, right? Because material is heterogeneous and different techniques give different values. So just the inputs are a challenge. Well, one can use computers to get some inputs. One can take a tropocollagen molecule and say use molecular simulations. The answers depend on velocity and so on. We get, and then it's a nonlinear characteristics. So which slope we want to use, or how much of a curve we want to use. And then we look at these different scales. Not so important here, the details, but one can use effective medium theories, but still, can we use continuum at nanoscale? Do we have representative volume element? Do we know the properties? One can use, and then this, the interpenetration. So most effective medium theories assume that there's matrix inclusion. But there is in self-consistent method, which was proposed for polycrystals, the idea is that there is no matrix. So we are assuming that there is no matrix. There's no matrix, two phases are interpenetrating, so we just have two inclusion points. And that takes care of that. But the other thing is that actually some additional characterization done actually by transmission electron microscopy of another collaborator, Professor Henry Schwartz from McMaster University. He observed that actually minerals are mainly forming like these circular surfaces around minerals instead of just sand. So we did a very simple model, trying the standard model and this new model, and saw that the properties are actually much better when this observation is used. So now we have this mineralized collagen fibril and then forming a lamella. So we want to have these fibers arranged preferentially. And we can use various inputs, orientation, volume fraction, and so on, and obtain anisotropic properties as well as deformation modes and fracture. We can look, so then you remember that these osteons and other structures are these different lamella in different orientations. So laminate theory of composite materials can be used to evaluate, to predict properties, local properties of these different substructures or structures at microscale. Then at mesoscale, so we call it the osteons in interstitial bone matrix. So one can use, again, effective properties or to use finite elements and be fractured there. And we also did quite a bit on trabecular bone, compressing it, trying to understand what governs damage. The question was, what plasticity rule to use? There are no apparent dislocations in bones, so which model to use, and then trying to match measured values with computation of matrons. And the final goal, of course, is a whole bone, which is heterogeneous, and using inputs from previous scales, we can predict its fractures. So this is not shown. The loading is not shown, but when a person falls, usually on a hip, the load will be acting on femoral head, and often breaks here. So one can do predictions at that scale, and that would be patient-specific computational model of bone fracture. All right, so summarizing, recapping, one can study bone, one can get a pretty good connection between experiments and theory, but still a challenge how to do it on a patient. So definitely better diagnostic tools are needed, and this indentation is very promising. So we do quite a bit of simulations on what really that microindentation can give us. So now have this movie of normal versus osteoporotic bone. It shows that bone is a living material. So actually bone is constantly forming and resorbing, forming and resorbing. So when bone breaks, this formation and resorption means that bone can heal and be almost like the old bone, the intact bone. And but you also see that when this resorption and formation is affected, meaning there's more resorption than formation, there will be less struts in bone, and that's what osteoporotic bone is. So so bone is remodeling. So one can study this problem in many different ways. Some time ago, we had a seminar, and the speaker was talking about experiments that were done on rat ulna. So basically, they took a rat, they were taking a live rat, and then loading it for 300 for a number of loads, and for a number of weeks, and on one limb, not the other, and saw that there was a big increase in bone cross-section. So we wanted to model it, and we got it through a simple remodeling log, which is used for that purpose. And you can see here that this is a finite element analysis, and the white is very high stress. So if you do loading, this loading on original bone shape, high stresses. After it adapts, stresses become lower. So basically bone builds more cross-section when it's loaded, so stresses become lower. So the experiments were done in such a way that there were 360 cycles per day. And we saw that actually doing it, experiments showed that doing it in 4 times a day instead of 1 was better. So 90 times 4 was better than 360. And so we thought, how can we model it? So finally we figured out that we could, so this is like this threshold. So if we lower the threshold, then we can capture it. So the idea is if there's more, if exercise is more often, next time when exercise starts, cells remember that there was exercise, so they act more quickly. Right? So we could match the area is regeneration of bone. So bone can beautifully heal when fractured, but if there is a big chunk of bone missing, it will not regenerate by itself. So yeah, bone heals by itself when fractured, but if that defect is large, it will not. So the idea is to put scaffolds and some mechanical loads to stimulate bone regeneration. So let me move on to the last topic. So, so in general, biological materials are composite materials, have hierarchical structures, are often porous, sometimes mineralized like teeth, bones, functionally graded, fluid-filled, multifunctional, adaptive, self-healing. So we can use ideas from nature to create new materials. So here are a couple of examples of how we used lessons learned about bone. So one thing that piqued our interest was this interpenetration. So most composites are matrix inclusion. So we were wondering what if two phases are interpenetrating, but then what architecture to use. So we thought, let's be extremely basic, the most basic that we can be, and let's assume that there's 50-50 soft phase, stiff phase, and we consider this checkerboard, which we have two phases, they are not continuous, right? Checkerboard. So two phases are discontinuous. Then we have inclusion problems when we have either stiff inclusion or a soft inclusion. And then we have this interpenetrating structure when we have inner stiff and outer soft and reverse. And periodic boundary conditions, except when we test. And yeah, and we found very interesting results that actually, having stiff frame gave stiffest response, but these were very close to it. And the other class, so bone is a porous material with these smooth pulse connections. So most lattice structures have sharp connections, like truss-like structures. So these triply periodic minimal surfaces have smooth surfaces. And there are a number of them. Here I'm just showing 3. And they are actually inspired by nature, not specifically on bone, except that bone has these smooth surfaces. But butterfly wings have its structure, so bubbles. And yeah, so we would 3D print them and then study various multi-fluid properties to understand, to see how they compare with more traditional porous materials. So this completes my presentation. I wanted maybe just to give you a couple more slides on a couple of other topics. So another area that we are interested in are composites, nanocomposites, and say polymer composites, and what if we want to make them conductive? So what type of fillers we would need and how much of them per collection. We also look at some novel polymers which can heal and bond and deform. And finally, I've been involved in the Center on High Voltage High Temperature Materials and Structures, where we looked at novel materials for various engineering applications. So, thank you.
Questions? I do have one question. I can start. So you were showing, first thank you for this very nice presentation. My question is, you were showing that the response of the bone is dependent also on the way that they remember. So there's some sort of a history that is stored there, right?
Yes, there is, yes, yes.
So how does that, I mean, but when you were showing how you're modeling it, you were showing it as linear elastic, isothermic.
Correct.
So how does that, I mean, we do have this with viscoelastic material, like it has some history dependent, like response. So how do you take this into account whenever you're doing linear elastic?
Yes, yes, very good question. So, yeah, bone is viscoelastic also, but there is time dependence and so on. It's a polymer, so 50% polymer. A lot of our studies, and in general studies done in literature, are assume linear elasticity. Some assume plasticity, much fewer assume viscoelasticity. One could account for it, but yeah, I have not specifically done. But yes, this is of course very important point. So bone is putting impact resistance and so on. So viscoelastic properties would contribute, and you can see it. So when you do this microindentation, as dynamic nanoindentation or this microindentation actually involves cyclic loading, so we can capture these properties also.
Thank you. Other questions?
Thanks, great presentation. It was really nice and totally new for me, but I see a lot of the parallels to what we did in asphalt materials also. So really, thanks for coming to present. I'm wondering, this bone-to-bone interface, have you done any work there to look at what's, I think there's some, again, this is totally outside my area of expertise, but I think there's some kind of joint that joins two bones together. Have you looked at all at the interface and modeling that, or have others?
So you mean not within bone, but when two bones join
At the interface
together.
of two bones, because I assume that's where a lot of these problems happen also, these mechanical failures, you might call them, or mechanical issues.
Yes. So two bones are joined together, right? So like knees, then elbows. So the connection is through cartilage. So cartilage is another material that I wanted to study, but cartilage is a material that has the lowest coefficient of friction of the whole materials, like 0.00 something, and it's on top of bone, so it's connected to bone. It has very interesting structure that collagen fibers are perpendicular to bone and where it joins bone, and then at that connection where there's joint, they are parallel to surface to promote sliding. But yeah, the idea is that if bones did not have this very smooth connection, there would be two bones wrapping each other and really getting, damaged, just like it's done when one has osteoarthritis or some serious injury of a joint, right? So yes, so that interface, of course, depends on the health of the joint, but that's cartilage. But there are many other interfaces in bone, right? But they would be inside the bone.
Right.
Yes.
So do you see a path towards development of synthetic bones?
Synthetic bones, you mean to use for tissue engineering or just for other applications?
You get to pick which one you'd like to answer.
Yes, so there is a huge area of big interest and lots of activity on creating scaffolds for bone. So what I mentioned is that if there is a big chunk of bone missing, meaning like critical size defect, that could be due to the fact that, let's say, there is cancer, one needs to remove that region, so there is a big chunk of bone missing, or there could be some traumatic injury where this bone is is damaged. So bone cells, if there is a big space, bones will not grow back. So they must be quite close together. So the idea is to put a scaffold, which is like a artificial structure, and where bone cells will start growing new bone. Right? So there are many propositions. Some researchers propose polymers, others ceramics, and so on. And there are of course implants. So yeah, and then for implants, one wants to create, have ideally material that has very similar properties to bone, because if it's a very stiff material in bone will not like it or will start resorbing through adaptation because will think it's not needed and so on. So yes, so people study bones so they can create material scaffolds or implants for orthopedic applications. But yeah, what one can also look at is that bone is porous, bone has lamellar structures, bone is functionally graded, and so on. It's a very light material, has high impact resistance. The other thing is, if you look at the Ashby plots, which they plot, like, let's say, strength and toughness. Most materials are either tough or strong, right? And so collagen is tough, ceramic is strong, and usually if you combine, you get lower properties. But bone and other biological materials give you strong and tough material. But yeah, for structural engineering applications, one can think of truss-like structures, building materials, and so on that will be bio-inspired. Of course, if materials could self-heal and adapt to different loads, that would be nice too, and that's of course of interest to scientists. So I don't know if I fully answered your question, but it's a very broad.
You have, thank you.
Yes.
I was curious if you observed, because as you mentioned, the bone characterization depends on the environment and then the demand. So within the human body, the demand on a vertebrae would be different than your forearm or your feet. And you are observing a specific, you had an example for the hip. So one, have you seen differences depending on the location of the human body? And two, how are you able to generalize that local observation, say on the hip bone, to those other body parts?
Yeah, excellent question. So so of course one can study different bones, right, in the body. Of course, pig has motion is different than human motion, so different bones are loaded differently than humans. But yeah, there will be differences. I studied femurs because they were the biggest ones. It was easiest for us to work with femurs being biggest, but sometimes we did tibias or ulnas. For reference point indentation, they do tibia. So we studied tibias. Tibia is something that is easiest to access. The big question by research community is how representative is the property of tibia bone to the whole health of skeleton. So there are other studies done on that, but the problem is if they do it on humans, how do they really test properties of people's bones? They cannot, right, unless the person dies.
Can I do it? Just kidding.
Any other question?
Thank you so much. I guess I
Yes,
have
there's
a
one more
question. All right.
You said behavior is age dependent and that bones get stiffer with age. Is there also a degeneration, or what is it that's making us more prone to a fracture? Is it just that stiffness, or is there something else?
Yes, very good question, excellent question. So Yeah, so in my study, we were looking at increase in age, but the oldest bone was like 2 years old and pig lives 20 years. So it was still a young bone, right? So it was like from 0 to maybe 7 years of human age. So young bone. So very young, very small children, young children have very more ductile bones, less mineralized. They are not carrying much weight, right? They are not